Hey there, beloved members of the Inspirational Chronicles family. Today, we bring you the heartwarming story of a struggling young woman whose small act of kindness to a hungry child changed her life forever when she discovered the boy's father was one of the richest men in the country. Stay with us until the end to witness how genuine compassion can open doors you never imagined possible. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss these life-changing stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Chicago in late November, when bitter winds swept across Lake Michigan and the first snowflakes danced through the gray city skyline. Olivia Summers, her worn woolen gloves clutching a small paper bag, hurried along the frost-covered path of Millennium Park. Her auburn hair, partially hidden under a second-hand knit cap, fluttered with each anxious glance at her watch. Just 20 minutes remained until her interview at a corporate office downtown. Her fifth this month and potentially her last chance to escape the crushing weight of mounting bills and an eviction notice taped to her apartment door. "You've got this, Olivia," she whispered, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "You've prepared for this. They'll see your potential." But the confidence in her words couldn't mask the doubt gnawing at her insides. For months since, the community center where she'd worked as a youth counselor lost its funding. Her savings had evaporated like morning dew under a harsh summer sun. The paper bag in her hand contained her last meal of the day, a simple peanut butter sandwich she'd carefully prepared that morning, saving half for after the interview when hunger would inevitably return. As she rounded the giant reflective bean sculpture, a sound stopped her in her tracks. Not the typical urban symphony of car horns and distant sirens, but a soft, muffled sobbing. Olivia turned, her green eyes scanning the nearly empty park. There, huddled on a bench beneath the skeletal branches of a maple tree, sat a young boy, no older than 7. His expensive-looking navy blue coat and matching hat seemed at odds with his red-rimmed eyes and trembling shoulders. Olivia checked her watch, her heart racing. "I don't have time for this," she thought, the interview opportunity too precious to risk. But her feet, operating with a will of their own, carried her toward the distressed child. Perhaps it was her years as a youth counselor, or simply the instinct to help someone smaller and more vulnerable than herself, but she couldn't just walk away. "Hey there," she said gently, kneeling at a safe distance so as not to frighten him further. "Are you okay?" The boy looked up, his face tear-streaked, but his eyes surprisingly composed. He didn't answer immediately, only clutched the edge of his coat tighter as if seeking protection from more than just the cold. I can't find my dad," he finally whispered, his voice small but clear against the winter wind. "We were at his meeting and I got bored and wanted to see the bean, and now I don't know how to get back. And my stomach hurts because I'm so hungry." Olivia's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. She glanced around the park, now emptier as the afternoon grew colder. No frantic parent in sight, no security guards within calling distance. She looked back at her watch, 15 minutes until her interview. The corporate building was at least 10 minutes away at a brisk walk. "What's your name?" she asked, forcing a calm into her voice she didn't quite feel. "Ethan," the boy replied, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Ethan Kingsley." "Well, Ethan Kingsley, I'm Olivia, and I promise we're going to find your dad. Have you had anything to eat today?" Ethan shook his head, his lower lip trembling slightly. "We were going to have lunch after Dad's meeting, but now I'm lost and really hungry." Without hesitation, Olivia reached into her paper bag and pulled out her sandwich. Her stomach protested with a quiet growl, reminding her this was the only food she had until tomorrow when her final paycheck would arrive, but she pushed the thought aside. "Here," she said with a warm smile, breaking the sandwich in half and offering the larger portion to Ethan. "This should help until we find your dad." Ethan's eyes widened at the offering, a mixture of surprise and hunger flashing across his small face. He hesitated, his expensive mittens hovering uncertainly. "My nanny says I shouldn't take food from strangers," he said. Though his gaze remained fixed on the sandwich, Olivia nodded seriously. "Your nanny is absolutely right. That's very smart." She thought for a moment, then smiled. "How about this? I'll take a bite first to show you it's safe, and we can sit right here in the open where everyone can see us." And then as soon as you've had something to eat, we'll go straight to the park security office to find your dad." The boy considered this, his bright eyes studying her face with surprising intensity for someone so young. Then he nodded, a tiny smile lifting the corner of his mouth. Olivia took a small bite of the sandwich half still in her hands, then passed the larger portion to Ethan. He accepted it gratefully, practically inhaling the first few bites. "Slow down there." Olivia laughed gently. "You'll get a stomachache if you eat too fast." As Ethan ate more carefully, Olivia checked her phone. The interview would start in 10 minutes. There was no way she could make it now. A heavy weight settled in her chest as she composed a quick, apologetic email to the hiring manager, explaining the emergency situation. She tried not to think about her dwindling bank account or the eviction notice. Some things were simply more important. "How old are you, Ethan?" she asked, attempting to distract herself from her worries. "I'm 7 3/4, he replied with the precision only children find important. "My birthday is in March. Dad says I'll get to visit the Space Museum in Washington then." Olivia smiled. "You like space?" Ethan's entire demeanor transformed, his previous distress momentarily forgotten, as he launched into an enthusiastic explanation of black holes, his half-eaten sandwich temporarily forgotten in his excitement. Olivia listened attentively, asking questions at all the right moments, her own troubles temporarily forgotten in the face of the boy's contagious enthusiasm. "My dad knows a real astronaut," Ethan announced proudly. "He came to our house for dinner once and showed me pictures from the International Space Station." "That sounds amazing," Olivia replied, genuinely impressed. She wondered briefly what kind of family Ethan came from. His clothes, his vocabulary, and his casual mention of astronaut dinner guests all pointed to privilege far beyond her own experience. With the sandwich finished, Olivia stood and offered her hand. "Ready to find your dad now?" Ethan nodded, slipping his mittened hand into hers with surprising trust. His small fingers curled around hers as they walked toward the park security office. Near the entrance, Olivia told him silly stories about her old pet cat who was afraid of mice, making Ethan giggle despite his lingering nervousness. At the security office, a uniformed guard with salt and pepper hair looked up as they entered. "Can I help you folks?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. "This is Ethan Kingsley," Olivia explained. "He got separated from his father in the park. We need to contact his family." The guard's eyebrows rose slightly at the surname, Kingsley. "Huh." He typed something into his computer, then picked up a phone. "I'll call this in right away." While the guard made his call, Olivia helped Ethan wipe a smudge of peanut butter from his cheek with a tissue from her purse. "You know," she said softly, "you're very brave. Some kids would have been too scared to talk to anyone when they got lost." Ethan beamed at the compliment. "Dad says Kingsleys don't show fear, but it's okay to ask for help when you need it." "Your dad sounds pretty smart," Olivia replied with a smile. "He is. He's the smartest person in the whole world. He runs this huge company and everyone listens when he talks. Even the people on TV want to know what he thinks." Ethan's face shone with unmistakable pride. Olivia was about to respond when the office door burst open. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit strode in, his presence immediately commanding the small space. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes, piercing blue and intensely focused, that made Olivia instinctively take a step back. The air in the room seemed to electrify with his arrival. "Ethan," he said, his deep voice controlled but laced with barely restrained emotion. "Dad," Ethan cried, running to the man and throwing his arms around his legs. The man knelt down, checking his son with careful precision, his hands moving over Ethan's shoulders and face as if verifying he was unharmed. "What did I tell you about wandering off?" The man's tone was stern, but not unkind. "Mr. Reynolds and the security team have been searching everywhere." "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, looking down. "I just wanted to see the bean." The man sighed, briefly closing his eyes before pulling his son into a tight embrace. For that moment, the commanding presence faltered, revealing just a father terrified for his child. When he stood again, His composure had returned, and his gaze shifted to Olivia, assessing her with calculating intensity. "And you are?" His question came without preamble. The words precise and measured. Olivia straightened her posture instinctively. Under his scrutiny, "Olivia Summers, I found Ethan sitting alone by the bean sculpture." Ethan tugged at his father's sleeve. "She gave me her sandwich, Dad. She was super nice and told me funny stories about her scaredy cat." The man's expression remained unchanged, his eyes continuing their assessment of Olivia's worn coat, second-hand boots, and the simple tote bag that held her resume and portfolio. She felt suddenly self-conscious of every frayed thread and scuffed surface. "Alexander Kingsley," he finally said, extending a hand. His grip was firm and cool, like his demeanor. "Thank you for helping my son." The name registered in Olivia's mind. Alexander Kingsley, CEO of Kingsley Innovations, the tech giant whose skyscraper dominated Chicago's skyline. His face occasionally appeared in business magazines and news segments about market disruption and technological breakthroughs. She'd applied for a position at one of his subsidiary companies just last week, though at such a junior level that she'd never expected to breathe the same air as the man himself. "Of course," she replied, finding her voice. Anyone would have done the same. One corner of Alexander's mouth lifted slightly. "I've found that's rarely true, Ms. Summers." He reached into his suit jacket and produced a business card, holding it between two fingers. "My assistant will arrange appropriate compensation for your time and assistance." Olivia felt a flush of indignation warm her cheeks. The man thought she'd helped his child for money. She pressed her lips together, pushing the card back toward him. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Kingsley. I didn't help Ethan expecting payment." Alexander's eyebrows rose fractionally. Perhaps he wasn't accustomed to having anything refused, much less money. Before he could respond, Ethan spoke up. "Dad, Olivia missed her important meeting to help me. She said it was for a job." Alexander's gaze sharpened. "Is that true?" Olivia swallowed, uncomfortable with the sudden spotlight. "It's fine. I can reschedule." The lie came easily, though she knew the opportunity was lost. Her phone had already shown 3 missed calls from the hiring manager. Alexander studied her with renewed interest, as if recalibrating his initial assessment. "What position were you interviewing for?" "Community Outreach Coordinator at Harman Publishing." She answered, seeing no reason to hide it. "It's not important now." "Harman Publishing," he repeated, his tone unreadable. "They're a subsidiary of Kingsley Media Group." Olivia's breath caught. Of course they were. The universe apparently had a cruel sense of humor today. "I see," she managed, unable to form a more coherent response. Alexander checked his watch, a timepiece that probably cost more than 6 months of Olivia's rent. "We've taken enough of your day, Ms. Summers. Thank you again for your assistance." He turned toward the door, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder to guide him. The boy resisted, looking back at Olivia with a small frown. "Wait, Dad. We can't just leave. She gave me her lunch, and now she doesn't have anything to eat." Ethan's voice carried the simple moral clarity that adults often lose sight of. Alexander paused, looking down at his son with an expression Olivia couldn't quite interpret. Something between surprise and perhaps a hint of pride. "Is that true?" he asked, turning back to Olivia. "You gave him your lunch?" Olivia shrugged, embarrassed by the focus on what had been a simple act. "It was just a sandwich." "It was her last sandwich," Ethan insisted, clearly having picked up on something Olivia thought she'd hidden well. Children, she'd learned in her years of counseling, often notice things adults missed. Alexander's gaze intensified, making Olivia feel like she was under a microscope. She resisted the urge to fidget. "Well then," he said after a moment, "the least we can do is replace it. Ethan and I were about to have lunch at the Drake. Would you join us, Miss Summers?" The invitation caught Olivia completely off guard. The Drake Hotel was one of Chicago's most exclusive establishments, where lunch for 2 could easily cost what she'd once made in a day at the community center. "I couldn't possibly," she began, but Ethan interrupted. "Please come. They have the best chocolate cake ever. Dad always lets me have a slice, even though my nanny says sugar is bad for concentration." Alexander's expression softened almost imperceptibly at his son's enthusiasm. "Consider it a proper thank you," he added, his tone making it clear this wasn't truly a request. "My driver is waiting outside." Olivia glanced down at her weathered boots and simple attire, wholly inappropriate for the Drake's elegant dining room, as if reading her thoughts. Alexander continued, "The private dining room has no dress code. Ms. Summers and Ethan would be disappointed if you declined." Ethan nodded vigorously, his eyes pleading. Trapped between the boy's hopeful expression and his father's expectant gaze, Olivia found herself nodding. "Thank you. That would be lovely." Outside the security office, a sleek black Bentley idled by the curb, a uniformed driver standing at attention beside the rear door. As they approached, the driver opened the door with a respectful nod. "Harvey, this is Ms. Summers. She'll be joining us for lunch," Alexander stated. Guiding Ethan into the vehicle first. Olivia hesitated at the car's entrance, feeling as though she were about to cross an invisible boundary between her world and one she'd only glimpsed from afar. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The interior of the Bentley was a universe away from the cramped public buses Olivia usually took across the city, but her soft leather seats, warm ambient lighting, and the subtle scent of sandalwood enveloped her as she settled in, trying not to appear too awestruck. A small console between the seats contained what looked like controls for individual climate settings and a miniature refrigerator. Ethan bounced excitedly beside her, seemingly recovered from his ordeal in the park. "This car has TVs in the headrests and a special button that makes the windows dark when Dad needs to work," he informed her proudly. "That's impressive," Olivia replied, genuinely amazed at such luxury. She caught Alexander watching her from the opposite seat, his expression unreadable behind steel blue eyes. As the car glided through Chicago traffic with supernatural smoothness, Ethan chattered about his school science project, something involving model rockets, while Olivia nodded and asked appropriate questions. Alexander remained largely silent, occasionally checking messages on his phone, but never fully removing his attention from the interaction between his son and this stranger who had entered their lives so unexpectedly. The Drake Hotel loomed ahead, its historic facade exuding old-world grandeur. The driver pulled directly to the entrance where a doorman in a crisp uniform immediately opened the car door. Olivia followed Alexander and Ethan through the opulent lobby, acutely aware of the contrast between her practical winter attire and the designer outfits adorning other guests. A manager materialized before them, his posture deferential. "Mr. Kingsley, welcome back. Your private room is prepared, as always." "Thank you, James. We'll need a setting for one more today." "Of course, sir. Right this way." They were escorted through the main dining room, where Olivia noticed several heads turn to follow their progress. Alexander Kingsley was clearly a recognized figure here, his presence causing a ripple of whispers and subtle nods of acknowledgement. The private dining room was intimate yet elegant, a round table set near windows overlooking the winter gray waters of Lake Michigan, fresh flowers arranged artfully in the center, and place settings of china and silver that probably cost more than Olivia's entire dish collection. "Please, sit." Alexander gestured to a chair that a staff member had pulled out for her. Ethan immediately claimed the seat next to hers, while Alexander took the one opposite. No menus appeared. Instead, a server approached with a respectful bow. "The usual selection for Master Ethan, sir." Alexander nodded. "And for Ms. Summers and myself, Chef Lawrence winter tasting menu, with non-alcoholic pairings for the table." "Very good, sir." Olivia opened her mouth to protest. She would have been happy with a simple sandwich replacement, but thought better of it. This was clearly Alexander's world, where decisions were made without consultation and executed without question. When they were momentarily alone, an awkward silence descended. Olivia fidgeted with her napkin, unsure of the proper protocol in such surroundings. "So, Ms. Summers," Alexander finally said, his voice measured and professional. "Ethan mentioned you work with children." She looked up, surprised he'd initiated conversation. "I did, yes. I was a youth counselor at the West Side Community Center until it lost funding a few months ago." That's why I was interviewing at Harman Publishing. They have a children's literacy initiative I was hoping to join." Alexander's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "And what drew you to youth counseling?" The question was unexpected. Most people asked about her qualifications or experience, not her motivations. Olivia considered. Her answer carefully. "I grew up in the foster system," she replied honestly. "Had some wonderful placements and some less ideal ones. The consistent bright spots were the counselors and teachers who made me feel seen, really seen. When I felt invisible to everyone else, I wanted to be that person for other kids." Ethan looked up from the puzzle the server had discreetly provided him. "What's the foster system?" Olivia glanced at Alexander, unsure if she should explain such concepts to his sheltered son. "It's when children live with families who aren't their birth parents," Alexander answered smoothly, surprising Olivia with his direct approach, sometimes temporarily, sometimes permanently. "Like adoption?" Ethan asked. "Sometimes it leads to adoption," Olivia added gently, "but not always." Ethan considered this with the seriousness only children can bring to new concepts. "So you had different families. Was that scary, Ethan?" Alexander cautioned. "That may be too personal." "It's all right," Olivia assured him. "Yes, sometimes it was scary, Ethan. But I also met amazing people who taught me important things, like how to be brave when I'm afraid, and how even small kindnesses can make a big difference to someone who's having a hard day, like giving away your sandwich," Ethan asked, his eyes wide with understanding. Olivia smiled warmly. "Exactly like that. The first course arrived tiny, artistic arrangements that looked more like sculptures than food. Ethan received what appeared to be a gourmet version of chicken tenders and fries, though presented with the same elegance as the adults' dishes. As they ate, the conversation shifted to safer topics: Ethan's school, the upcoming holidays, and neutral observations about Chicago's weather. Alexander remained reserved but attentive, occasionally asking surprisingly insightful questions about Olivia's educational background and professional experiences. She found herself responding with more candor than she'd intended, perhaps lulled by the surreal nature of the situation. She told him about her scholarship to Northwestern, her thesis on trauma-informed approaches to youth education, and her dream of eventually founding a program specifically for creative arts therapy for foster children. "An admirable goal," Alexander commented, his tone giving away nothing of his true thoughts, "but probably impractical," Olivia admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Nonprofit funding is nearly impossible to secure these days, especially for new initiatives without proven metrics." Alexander studied her over the rim of his water glass. "Most worthwhile endeavors appear impractical at first glance. The difference lies in execution and persistence." Coming from anyone else, it might have sounded like a motivational poster platitude. From him, a man who had built a technology empire from an initial garage startup, the words carried the weight of lived experience. Dessert arrived with theatrical flair, a chocolate sphere that melted away under warm caramel sauce, to reveal an intricate confection beneath. Ethan watched with undisguised delight, his earlier weariness completely forgotten. Olivia couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm, remembering how simple pleasures had often been the brightest points in her own childhood. "Ms. Summers," Alexander said as the server discreetly withdrew, "I'd like to circle back to your interview." At Harman Publishing, Olivia set down her spoon. Her enjoyment of the exquisite dessert suddenly dampened. "It's really not important. These things happen. On the contrary, Ethan's welfare is my highest priority, but I don't believe in collateral damage." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing a business transaction rather than her derailed career opportunity. "I'll speak with Harman's director personally. They'll reschedule your interview." Olivia straightened, a flash of pride overriding her usual caution. "I appreciate the gesture, Mr. Kingsley, but I don't want special treatment. If I get a position, I want it to be because I'm qualified, not because the CEO made a phone call." Alexander's eyebrows rose fractionally. Perhaps he wasn't accustomed to having his assistance refused. He studied her for a moment, then nodded, once as if confirming something to himself. "Integrity is refreshing, Miss Summers. Rare, but refreshing." The meal concluded with Alexander receiving a discreet notification on his phone. He glanced at it, then looked to his son. "Ethan, Ms. Reynolds is waiting to take you to your piano lesson. I have meetings this afternoon." Disappointment flickered across the boy's face, quickly masked. "Yes, Dad." Olivia recognized the expression all too well, a child learning early to hide emotions that might inconvenience adults. She'd seen it countless times at the community center, though usually from children with far less privileged circumstances than Ethan Kingsley. A stylishly dressed woman in her 40s appeared at the doorway, presumably the Ms. Reynolds mentioned. Ethan rose dutifully, then hesitated, turning to Olivia with unexpected earnestness. "Will I see you again?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. The question caught Olivia off guard. She glanced at Alexander, unsure how to respond to such a request from a child whose life existed in a completely different stratosphere from her own. "I don't," she began uncertainly. "Miss Summers is very busy, Ethan," Alexander interjected smoothly. "She has her own life and responsibilities." Ethan's face fell, though he nodded with the practiced composure of a child accustomed to disappointment. "It was nice meeting you," he said formally, extending his small hand as if mimicking his father's business mannerisms. Olivia shook it gently, then, following an impulse she couldn't quite explain, pulled him into a quick hug. "It was wonderful meeting you too, Ethan. Thank you for sharing your chocolate cake expertise with me." The boy beamed, his composure cracking to reveal genuine happiness. He whispered something in her ear before Ms. Reynolds led him away with efficient professionalism. Alexander watched his son's departure with an expression Olivia couldn't quite decipher, something between pride and a deeper emotion that vanished before she could identify it. "What did he say to you?" Alexander asked once they were alone. Olivia smiled softly. "He said I explain things better than his science tutor." For the first time, Alexander's carefully maintained facade showed a crack, a brief, genuine smile that transformed his stern features and revealed unexpected warmth. "High praise indeed. Ethan's science tutor has to PhDs." An awkward silence settled between them as the reality of their situation reasserted itself. The fairy tale lunch was ending, and Olivia would soon return to her precarious existence of dwindling savings and mounting bills. "I should be goin'," she said, reaching for her worn tote bag. "Thank you for lunch. It was unexpected." Alexander nodded, his business demeanor returning. "My driver will take you wherever you need to go." "That's not necessary, I insist." His tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. Olivia relented, too exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day to argue further. As they walked through the hotel lobby, Olivia became acutely conscious of curious glances from other patrons. What did they see? A successful businessman with a clearly out-of-place young woman in second-hand clothes. The thought made her cheeks burn. Outside, the same sleek Bentley waited at the curb, the driver opening the door with practiced efficiency. Alexander walked her to the car, his tall figure cutting an imposing silhouette against the afternoon light. "Where shall Harvey take you, Miss Summers?" he asked. Olivia hesitated, reluctant to give her actual address in the struggling neighborhood. She called home. The West Side Community Center would be fine. "I left some personal items there when the program ended." Alexander studied her for a moment, his penetrating gaze suggesting he saw through the half-truth, but chose not to comment. Instead, he extended his hand in a formal goodbye. "Thank you again for helping my son today, Miss Summers. Not everyone would have sacrificed their own interests for a stranger's child." Olivia shook his hand, struck again by the contradictions in this man. The cold business exterior that occasionally revealed glimpses of genuine feeling, particularly where his son was concerned. "Anyone would have done the same," she replied. Simply, Alexander's expression suggested he disagreed with her assessment of human nature, but appreciated the sentiment nonetheless. "Goodbye, Miss Summers. Goodbye, Mr. Kingsley." As the car pulled away from the curb, Olivia watched Alexander's figure grow smaller through the tinted window. He stood watching until the Bentley turned the corner, an inscrutable expression on his face. She settled back against the luxurious leather, certain their brief intersection was now complete. Two lives that had momentarily crossed paths, only to continue on their separate trajectories. She couldn't have been more wrong. 1 week later, Olivia stood in her tiny apartment kitchen, carefully rationing the last of her pasta into portions that would stretch through the weekend. Her final paycheck from the community center had covered rent but left precious little for groceries. The window beside her rattled against the bitter December wind, the ancient heating system struggling to keep the temperature above chilly. Her phone buzzed on the counter, an unknown number with a Chicago area code, probably another recruiter, with positions she was either overqualified or underqualified for, never quite the right fit. Still, she couldn't afford to ignore potential opportunities. "Hello, this is Olivia Summers." "Ms. Summers, this is Patricia Donovan, executive assistant to Alexander Kingsley." The woman's voice was crisp and professional. "Mr. Kingsley would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to discuss a potential opportunity. A car will be sent to collect you." Olivia nearly dropped the phone, her mind racing. What kind of opportunity?" "Mr. Kingsley prefers to discuss the details in person." "Is the time acceptable?" "Yes, but excellent. The car will arrive at 9:30. Business casual attire is appropriate." "Good day, Ms. Summers." The line went dead before Olivia could ask any of the dozen questions swirling in her mind. She stared at her phone, wondering if the encounter in the park and the surreal lunch at the Drake had somehow catapulted her into an alternate reality. The next morning dawned gray and threatening snow. Olivia stood before her modest closet, surveying her limited options for business casual. She settled on her interview outfit, a simple navy skirt, white blouse, and the only blazer she owned, slightly worn at the elbows but still presentable. Her weathered boots would have to suffice. New shoes had been a luxury beyond reach for months now. At precisely 9:30, her phone buzzed with a text. "Your car is waiting downstairs." Not a taxi or rideshare, but a sleek black town car with tinted windows. The driver, different from Harvey, but equally professional, opened the door without comment on her modest apartment building with its peeling paint and security door hanging slightly ajar. 20 minutes later, they pulled up before Kingsley Tower, 60 stories of gleaming glass and steel dominating the Chicago skyline. In the daylight, Olivia had a moment to appreciate the architectural marvel that housed the headquarters of Kingsley Innovations. The building itself seemed to embody its owner, imposing, meticulously designed, and unapologetically commanding. Attention. In the soaring lobby, a security desk manned by uniformed personnel screened visitors with efficient precision. Olivia approached, suddenly conscious of her scuffed boots against the immaculate marble floor. "Olivia Summers to see Mr. Kingsley," she stated, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The guard's demeanor shifted subtly upon hearing the name. "Yes, Ms. Summers, you're expected." He handed her a visitor badge marked Executive Floor Access, apparently a designation that carried weight, judging by his newly respectful tone. A private elevator whisked her to the top floor without stopping, its mirrored walls reflecting her nervous expression back at her from every angle. The doors opened to reveal a reception area that more closely resembled a modern art gallery than an office. Minimalist furniture, abstract sculptures, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking panorama of the city and lake beyond. A poised woman in her 50s rose from behind a sleek desk. "Miss Summers, welcome to Kingsley Innovations. I'm Patricia Donovan. We spoke on the phone." She extended a manicured hand. "Mr. Kingsley will see you now." Patricia led her down a corridor, lined with what appeared to be original artwork, stopping before imposing double doors. She knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. Alexander Kingsley stood by the windows of a vast corner office, his tall figure silhouetted against the cityscape. He turned as they entered, his expression as unreadable as it had been during their lunch. "Ms. Summers," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Thank you for the invitation," Olivia replied, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "Though I'm not entirely sure why I'm here." Alexander gestured toward a seating area. Comfortable-looking chairs arranged around a low table where a coffee service waited. "Please sit. Would you like coffee?" The normality of the question in such extraordinary surroundings almost made Olivia laugh. "Yes, thank you." He poured 2 cups himself rather than summoning an assistant, a small action that surprised her. They settled into the chairs, the expansive office making Olivia acutely aware of the power differential between them. Alexander Kingsley in his bespoke suit with the city quite literally at his feet. Herself in her second-hand blazer with an eviction notice waiting at home. "I'll come directly to the point," Alexander said after a moment. "Since our meeting last week, I've had my team conduct a thorough background check on you." Olivia stiffened, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "You investigated me. Standard procedure." He replied unapologetically, "I don't make business decisions without due diligence. Business decisions. Mr. Kingsley, I don't understand what's happening here." Alexander set down his cup, his steel blue eyes fixed on hers with unsettling intensity. "Your academic record is impressive. Graduated summa cum laude despite working 2 jobs throughout university. Your references from the community center were exemplary, particularly regarding your work with their creative arts program for at-risk youth." He paused. "And your personal history? Well, it explains a great deal about your character." Olivia set her cup down with a sharp click against its saucer. "My personal history isn't relevant to whatever this is, Mr. Kingsley." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "On the contrary, Miss Summers, it's entirely relevant to the proposition I'm about to make." Alexander rose, moving to his desk where he retrieved a leather portfolio. Returning to the seating area, he placed it on the table between them and opened it to reveal architectural renderings of a modern, light-filled building surrounded by gardens. "This is the Kingsley Foundation's newest project," he explained, turning the drawings toward her. "A creative arts center for underserved youth in Chicago's West Side neighborhood, the same area where your community center was located." Olivia leaned forward, studying the beautiful renderings with a mixture of confusion and growing interest. The designs showed art studios, music rooms, a dance space, and even a small theater. "It's beautiful," she admitted, "but what does this have to do with me? I want you to run it." The words hung in the air between them, so unexpected that Olivia was certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me, the Kingsley Creative Arts Center needs a director," Alexander continued, his tone matter-of-fact as if he weren't offering to completely transform her life. "Someone with both the educational background and practical experience to develop and implement programs specifically designed for children from challenging circumstances. Someone who understands firsthand what these children need because they've lived it themselves." Olivia's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. "Mr. Kingsley, while I'm flattered, I don't have the administrative experience to run an entire center. I was a counselor, not a director. Your resume suggests otherwise. You managed the creative arts program at West Side, including budgeting, staffing, and curriculum development. You increased participation by 40% while reducing costs by 15%. Those are precisely the skills needed here, just on a larger scale." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "This doesn't make sense. A week ago, you didn't know I existed. Now you're offering me a position that most people would spend years working toward. Why?" Alexander's expression remained composed, but something shifted in his eyes, a brief vulnerability quickly masked. "My son hasn't stopped talking about you since our meeting. He was particularly impressed that you gave him your last sandwich without hesitation." "That's hardly qualification for running a multi-million-dollar facility," Olivia countered. "No, but it speaks to your character," Alexander replied. "And in my experience, skills can be taught, but character is innate." He paused, his gaze moving to the city beyond the windows. "Ethan has excellent instincts about people. Better than mine, perhaps." There was something in his tone, a hint of sadness or regret, that made Olivia wonder about the story behind his words. What had happened to make this powerful man value his young son's assessment of character so highly? The position includes a substantial salary package, comprehensive benefits, and a housing allowance, Alexander continued, returning to business mode. "The center is still under construction, scheduled to open in 6 months. During that time, you would work with our foundation team to finalize programming, hire staff, and establish community partnerships." Olivia's head spun with the possibilities. The chance to create exactly the kind of programs she'd always dreamed of, with resources she'd never imagined having access to. It was too perfect, too coincidental. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked directly. "Is it because you feel you owe me something for helping Ethan?" "Because you don't. Any decent person would have done the same." Alexander's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Summers, I don't make eight-figure investment decisions based on personal debts. The Kingsley Foundation has been planning this center for over a year. We've interviewed 12 candidates for the director position, none of whom had the combination of qualifications and authentic connection to the community that you possess." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. "That said, I won't pretend your interaction with my son didn't bring you to my attention. Ethan is." He paused, seeming to search for the right words, not easily impressed. "His mother died when he was 3, and since then, he's been surrounded by people who either want something from him because of who his father is, or who treat him as a responsibility rather than a child. You did neither." The mention of Ethan's mother caught Olivia by surprise. It explained the absence she'd sensed around the boy, the practiced way he handled disappointment, and perhaps some of Alexander's carefully maintained emotional distance. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said quietly. Alexander nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without inviting further discussion. "The offer stands on its own merits, Ms. Summers. You're qualified. You have a vision that aligns with the foundation's goals, and you have something no amount of degrees or experience can provide: genuine empathy for these children and their circumstances." He closed the portfolio and slid it toward her. "All the details are inside, including the architectural plans, preliminary budget, and proposed salary package. Take a week to consider it. The foundation will arrange temporary housing if you accept, until you find something suitable." Olivia's mind whirled with implications and possibilities. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a complete life transformation, a chance to actually create the programs she'd only theorized about in her thesis, to help children who, like her younger self, needed someone who truly understood their struggles. "And if I say no?" she asked, not because she was inclined to refuse, but because she wanted to understand the full context of this extraordinary situation. Something that might have been respect flickered in Alexander's eyes. "Then we continue our search, and you continue yours. No repercussions, no hard feelings." He paused. "Though Ethan would be disappointed. You'd tell him I turned down the position. I don't lie to my son, Ms. Summers, even when the truth is uncomfortable." Olivia nodded slowly, gathering the portfolio and rising from her seat. "I'll consider it carefully and let you know my decision." Alexander stood as well, extending his hand. "Patricia will show you out. The car will take you wherever you need to go." His handshake was firm, but no longer cold. And as their eyes met, Olivia had the distinct impression that beneath his controlled exterior, Alexander Kingsley was as uncertain about this unusual situation as she was. A revelation that made him suddenly seem more human than the business titan whose name adorned the building. In the elevator descending from the executive floor, Olivia opened the portfolio again, her fingers tracing the rendering of the Arts Center. A thought struck her with such clarity that she nearly laughed aloud. Her last sandwich, given away to a hungry child, might have just changed her life forever. 6 months later, Olivia stood in the sunlit atrium of the nearly completed Kingsley Creative Arts Center, clipboard in hand, as she directed the installation of a colorful mosaic created by local children. The once empty building had transformed into a vibrant space humming with purpose and possibility. Just weeks away from its grand opening, the lighting needs to be adjusted 3 degrees to reduce glare on the central panels, she instructed the installation team. "We want the pieces to catch the light without overwhelming viewers." "Yes, Ms. Summers," the lead technician responded, already making the adjustment with practiced precision. Olivia smiled to herself, still occasionally startled by how quickly her directions were implemented without question or hesitation. The transition from struggling youth counselor to director of a multi-million-dollar facility had been dizzying at times, but she'd adapted with a determination that surprised even herself. The center had become her passion project, consuming nearly every waking hour. She'd assembled a team of talented educators and artists, many from the same communities they aimed to serve. Together, they'd designed programs that went beyond traditional arts education to address the specific needs of children experiencing poverty, housing instability, and family trauma, all areas Olivia understood from both professional training and personal experience. Her new apartment, a sun-filled two-bedroom in a secure building just 10 minutes walk from the center, still felt surreal after years of struggling to make rent in cramped, drafty spaces. The housing allowance Alexander had mentioned turned out to be generous enough to place her in one of the Kingsley Foundation's own residential developments, a fact she discovered only after signing the lease. Miss Summers, Patricia Donovan's voice interrupted her thoughts. Alexander's executive assistant stood at the atrium entrance, impeccably dressed as always. Mr. Kingsley has arrived for the site inspection. He's in the main gallery with the contractors. Olivia nodded, smoothing her simple but elegant blazer, a far cry from the worn one she'd worn to their first official meeting. Thank you, Patricia. I'll join them right away. Over the past months, Olivia had worked closely with the Kingsley Foundation team, but had interacted with Alexander himself only during scheduled progress meetings. Their relationship remained strictly professional, cordial but distant, focused entirely on the center's development. Ethan, however, had become a regular presence in her life, often accompanying his father on site visits and eagerly offering suggestions for programs he thought other children would enjoy. She found Alexander in the main gallery, examining the recently installed lighting system with the construction foreman. His tailored suit and commanding presence stood in stark contrast to the dust and organized chaos of the still under construction space. Yet he moved through it with the confidence of someone who understood every technical detail. The recessed fixtures need to be adjusted, he was saying as Olivia approached. The specifications called for 90-degree spotlighting on the display walls, but these are clearly wider. We'll fix it immediately, Mr. Kingsley, the foreman assured him. Making notes, Alexander turned as Olivia approached, acknowledging her with a nod. Miss Summers, the center is coming together impressively. Thank you. We're on schedule for the opening next month. She handed him a tablet displaying the latest progress report. The community response has been overwhelming. We already have waiting lists for several programs. Alexander scrolled through the report, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Your outreach efforts have been effective. It helps that many families remember me from the old community center, Olivia explained. There's already built-in trust. Alexander nodded, returning the tablet. Precisely why you were the right choice for this position. They walked through the building together, Olivia highlighting key features and addressing minor issues that needed resolution before opening. Alexander listened attentively, occasionally offering suggestions that revealed his surprisingly detailed knowledge of the project. Where's Ethan today? Olivia asked as they entered the music room, where brand new instruments waited in perfect rows. Something softened in Alexander's expression at the mention of his son. Science competition at school. He insisted on participating even though it meant missing this visit. He paused, then added, he asked me to take pictures of the music room for him. He's particularly excited about the recording studio. Olivia smiled, picturing Ethan's enthusiasm. Tell him it will be ready for testing next week. He can be our first unofficial recording artist. They continued the tour, discussing logistics and programming with professional focus. Yet Olivia couldn't help noticing subtle changes in Alexander. Since their first meeting, moments when his carefully maintained facade seemed less rigid, his expressions more genuine, particularly when discussing elements of the center that would directly benefit the children. As they reached the small theater where performance arts classes would be held, Alexander paused, surveying the space with an appraising eye. My wife was a cellist, he said suddenly, the personal revelation catching Olivia completely off guard. She believed music and art were essential for children's development, not optional luxuries. Olivia remained silent, sensing this rare glimpse into his personal thoughts shouldn't be interrupted. She would have approved of this place, he continued, his voice taking on a quality Olivia hadn't heard before, something almost wistful. of what you're creating here. I wish I could have met her, Olivia replied softly. She sounds like a remarkable woman. Alexander's gaze remained fixed on the empty stage. She was. Ethan has her spirit, her ability to see the best in people. He turned to Olivia, his expression more open than she'd ever witnessed. She would have liked you. The unexpected compliment hung in the air between them, creating a moment of connection that transcended their professional relationship. For a brief instant, Olivia saw beyond the billionaire CEO to the widowed father who still carried his loss with him, perhaps shaping his every decision about his son's future. The moment was interrupted by Patricia appearing at the doorway. "Mr. Kingsley, your conference call with Tokyo is in 15 minutes. Alexander's expression immediately reset to its usual composed state. "Thank you, Patricia." He turned back to Olivia. "Professional once more. The center exceeds expectations. Ms. Summers, the foundation board will be pleased with the progress report." "Thank you, Mr. Kingsley." As he turned to leave, Alexander paused. "Ethan asked if you might join us for dinner this weekend to celebrate the center's completion." His tone was carefully neutral, giving no indication of his own thoughts on the invitation. Olivia smiled, genuinely touched by the boy's thoughtfulness. "I'd be delighted." Alexander nodded once. "Saturday at 7. Then, the car will collect you." With that, he was gone, leaving Olivia standing in the empty theater, wondering at the complexity of the man who had so unexpectedly changed the course of her life. The Kingsley estate sprawled across several manicured acres in Chicago's most exclusive suburb. Its stone facade and soaring windows illuminated against the evening sky as Olivia approached in the now familiar black car. Unlike Alexander's sleek downtown penthouse where previous foundation meetings had been held, this was his actual home, a place few outside his immediate circle ever saw. "We've arrived," Ms. Summers, the driver, announced, pulling up to an imposing entryway framed by stone columns. Olivia stepped out, smoothing the emerald dress she'd purchased specially for the occasion. Her first significant indulgence since her financial situation had stabilized. The dress was simple but elegant, appropriate for a professional dinner, yet more refined than her usual workwear. The massive oak door opened before she could ring the bell, revealing not a housekeeper as she'd expected, but Ethan himself, practically bouncing with excitement. "Olivia, you came," he exclaimed, as if he'd half expected her to cancel. He wore a child-sized button-up shirt and navy pants, his dark hair neatly combed in a style that mirrored his father's. "Of course I did," she smiled, charmed by his enthusiasm. "I wouldn't miss dinner with my favorite art critic." Ethan beamed at the title, reaching for her hand to pull her inside. "Dad's in the kitchen. He's actually cooking." This revelation surprised Olivia more than the grandeur of the home's interior. With its soaring ceilings and museum-quality artwork, Alexander Kingsley, CEO and billionaire, cooking dinner rather than employing a chef. Ethan led her through a gallery-like hallway into a vast kitchen that managed to be both state-of-the-art and unexpectedly warm. Copper pots hung from a ceiling rack, herbs grew in windowsill planters, and delicious aromas filled the air. Alexander stood at a large island, sleeves rolled up as he focused intently on plating what appeared to be a sophisticated pasta dish. He looked up as they entered, and Olivia was struck by how different he appeared in this setting, still commanding, but somehow more approachable without his usual business armor. "Ms. Summers." He greeted her with a nod. "Welcome. Please, after 6 months of working together, I think you can call me Olivia." She replied with a smile. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Olivia. Then. And I'm Alexander, at least for this evening. Dad makes the best Casio E. Pepe," Ethan announced proudly. He learned in Italy when he was negotiating some boring business deal. "It wasn't boring," Alexander corrected mildly. "It was a technology acquisition that eventually became our European headquarters." To Olivia, he added, "Though Ethan's assessment is fair, the cooking lessons were more memorable than the negotiations." The casual revelation that this titan of industry considered Italian cooking lessons a worthwhile use of his time offered yet another glimpse of the complex man behind the public persona. "I'm impressed," Olivia admitted. I can barely manage boxed macaroni and cheese. Then we'll add cooking lessons to the center's adult education program, Alexander replied, his tone so deadpan that it took her a moment to realize he was joking. Dinner was served in a comfortable room adjacent to the kitchen rather than the formal dining room Olivia had glimpsed on their way in. The pasta was indeed exceptional, accompanied by a simple salad and warm bread. Ethan dominated the conversation, eagerly updating Olivia on his science competition victory and peppering her with questions about the center's upcoming opening. Will there really be a recording studio where kids can make their own songs? He asked, eyes wide with excitement. Absolutely, Olivia confirmed. And a digital art lab, a dance studio, and a pottery workshop. We want children to have the chance to explore many different forms of creative expression. Can I try them all when I visit? Olivia glanced at Alexander, uncertain about the protocols surrounding Ethan's involvement with the foundation project. We'll arrange appropriate times for Ethan to participate, Alexander answered, understanding her unspoken question. The foundation board agreed that having him experience the programs firsthand will provide valuable feedback. After dinner, Ethan insisted on giving Olivia a tour of his favorite parts of the house, proudly showing off his bedroom with its space-themed decor and telescope positioned by the window. Dad had it specially calibrated so I can see Jupiter's moons on clear nights, he explained, his passion for astronomy evident in every word. The tour continued to a remarkable library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable reading nooks, then a music room housing several instruments, including a beautiful cello displayed in a custom case. That was Mom's, Ethan said quietly, his normal exuberance momentarily subdued. Dad keeps it exactly how she left it. Olivia nodded, understanding the significance of the preserved instrument. It's a beautiful way to remember her. When Ethan began to yawn despite his protests that he wasn't tired, Alexander appeared at the doorway. Time for bed, astronaut. You have your robotics class early tomorrow. Ethan's shoulders slumped in disappointment, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned to Olivia with unexpected seriousness. Will you come back again sometime? Not just for boring foundation meetings. The question caught her off guard, especially with Alexander standing right there. If your dad doesn't mind, I'd love to. Alexander's expression gave nothing away. We'll discuss it. Now say goodnight, Ethan. To Olivia's surprise, Ethan gave her a quick, fierce hug before heading upstairs with a chorus of goodnights trailing behind him. He's remarkable, Olivia said once Ethan had disappeared. You've done an amazing job with him. Alexander's expression softened marginally. He makes it easy, most of the time. He gestured toward the back of the house. Would you care for coffee on the terrace? The night is unusually mild for spring. The terrace overlooked immaculately landscaped gardens illuminated by subtle lighting that highlighted flowering trees and sculptural elements. They sat at a comfortable seating arrangement as a household staff member silently delivered coffee before disappearing back into the house. Ethan has grown quite attached to you, Alexander observed after a moment of companionable silence. Olivia cradled her coffee cup, choosing her words carefully. He's a special child, smart, curious, kind, and surprisingly perceptive for his age. Yes, Alexander agreed. Sometimes too perceptive. He paused, studying the garden rather than looking at her. He hasn't connected this easily with anyone since his mother died. The weight of this admission hung in the air between them. Olivia sensed Alexander rarely discussed such personal matters, particularly with someone who still occupied an ambiguous space between colleague and something more difficult to define. Children are resilient, she offered gently, but they also need space to process grief in their own way, on their own timeline. Alexander nodded, his gaze still distant. The child psychologists said something similar, still watching him struggle to connect with people, to trust new relationships. He trailed off, then seemed to recalibrate, his professional demeanor reasserting itself. The center opening is next week. Are the final preparations on track? Olivia allowed the change of subject, recognizing his need to retreat from emotional vulnerability. They discussed logistics and programming, the conversation flowing easily between professional topics. and more general discussions of education and community development. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander walked her to the waiting car, the spring night wrapping around them like a gentle blanket. "Thank you for dinner," Olivia said sincerely, "and please thank Ethan again for the tour." Alexander nodded, his hands in his pockets as he stood straight and tall in the driveway's soft lighting. "Olivia," he said, her name still sounding new on his lips. "The foundation is hosting a gala after the center's opening as director. Your presence is expected." "Of course," she replied, wondering why he felt the need to formally inform her of an event already on her calendar. "What I mean," he continued, a hint of uncharacteristic hesitation in his voice, "is that I'd like you to attend as my guest, not just as the center's director." Olivia blinked, caught completely off guard by what seemed to be a personal invitation from a man who had kept their relationship strictly professional for 6 months. "I'd be honored," she finally managed, studying his face for clues to his thoughts. For a brief moment, Alexander's carefully maintained facade seemed to slip, revealing something warm and genuine in his expression. "Good. The car will collect you at 7. As the Bentley pulled away from the estate, Olivia found herself wondering if she had just agreed to a date with Alexander Kingsley, and why the possibility made her heart beat faster than any job offer ever could. The Kingsley Creative Arts Center gleamed under the spring sunshine, its modern facade adorned with colorful banners announcing the grand opening. Children and parents from throughout Chicago's West Side neighborhood streamed through the doors, their excited voices filling the once empty halls with the very life Olivia had envisioned. During those long months of planning, she stood in the center of the atrium, dressed in a professional blue dress that complemented the center's logo colors, greeting families and directing them to various activity stations, where they could experience the programs firsthand. Every few minutes, she caught herself looking toward the main entrance, anticipating Alexander and Ethan's arrival despite knowing they would be among the last to appear, making their entrance only after all the guests and media had assembled. "Ms. Summers, the mayor has arrived," whispered her assistant, a bright-eyed graduate student named Marcus, who had quickly become indispensable. Olivia nodded, smoothing her dress and moving toward the entrance where Chicago's mayor waited with an entourage of city officials and cameras. The formal ceremonies would begin soon, marking the official transition from dream to reality. 2 hours later, after speeches from community leaders and foundation representatives, Alexander finally took the podium. He looked impeccable as always, in a perfectly tailored suit, his commanding presence immediately quieting the crowded atrium. "The Kingsley Foundation has funded many projects over the years," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "But few have aligned so perfectly with our mission of creating sustainable opportunities in underserved communities." He paused, his gaze finding Olivia in the front row. "The center represents more than just a building or programs. It represents belief in the transformative power of creativity and the right of every child to discover their unique talents, regardless of circumstance." Olivia felt a surge of emotion as he continued, outlining the center's vision in terms that mirrored her own passionate proposals during those early planning meetings. He spoke of art as both personal expression and professional pathway, of creativity as a healing force for children experiencing trauma, of community building through collaborative projects, all concepts she had championed when many on the foundation board had pushed for more traditional educational approaches. None of this would have been possible, Alexander concluded, without the extraordinary vision and dedication of our center director, Olivia Summers. Her personal journey from foster care to educational achievement is itself a testament to the resilience we hope to nurture in every child who walks through these doors. He gestured for her to join him at the podium, extending his hand as she climbed the steps. For a brief moment, their fingers intertwined, and Olivia felt an unmistakable squeeze of support before he stepped aside to let her address the crowd. The remainder of the opening day passed in a blur of activities, media interviews, and meaningful conversations with community members. By evening, when the last families had departed and only the gala preparations remained, Olivia finally had a moment to herself in her office. She sank into her chair, exhausted but exhilarated, when a soft, Knock interrupted her brief respite. Alexander stood in the doorway, his tie loosened slightly in a rare display of relaxed formality. "You should be proud," he said simply. "What you've accomplished here is remarkable." "What we've accomplished," she corrected gently, "this wouldn't exist without your foundation's support." Alexander shook his head, entering the office and closing the door behind him. "The foundation provided funding, but this," he gestured to encompass the center. "This is your vision brought to life. You've created something extraordinary, Olivia." The genuine admiration in his voice touched her deeply. Over the months of working together, their professional relationship had gradually evolved into something more complex, a mutual respect that occasionally hinted at deeper possibilities. Neither had acknowledged directly. "There's something I want to show you before the gala," he said. "Do you have a moment?" Curious, Olivia followed him through the now quiet building to a section of the main gallery she hadn't visited since early afternoon. There, displayed prominently on the central wall, was a bronze plaque she hadn't authorized, elegant lettering against a simple background. That read, "The Sophia Kingsley Memorial Wing, dedicated to ensuring that no child's creative spirit goes undiscovered, in loving memory of a mother who believed in the transformative power of art." Olivia's breath caught as she realized the significance. "Your wife," she whispered. Alexander nodded, his gaze fixed on the plaque. "Sophia believed that artistic expression could heal wounds invisible to the eye. After she died, I buried myself in work, focused on building the company's legacy rather than hers." He turned to Olivia, his usual reserve giving way to raw honesty. "Until a youth counselor with nothing to her name. But compassion gave away her last sandwich to my son and reminded me of what truly matters." Olivia felt tears threatening at the unexpected revelation. "Alexander, the villa is yours," he interrupted quietly. "What?" Olivia blinked, certain she'd misheard. "The foundation owns a property on Lake Michigan, a villa originally purchased as a potential retreat center for arts programs. The board voted unanimously yesterday to transfer ownership to you personally, in recognition of your extraordinary contribution to making this center a reality." Olivia shook her head in disbelief. "I can't accept something like that. It's too much." "It's already done," Alexander replied simply. "The paperwork awaits your signature, but the decision is final." "But why?" she managed, overwhelmed by the magnitude of such a gift. Alexander's expression softened in a way she'd only glimpsed on rare occasions, usually when he looked at Ethan. "Because some debts can never truly be repaid. Because you changed something in me, that day in the park. And because Ethan and I both believe you deserve a permanent home, one that can never be taken away by circumstances beyond your control." The vulnerability in his usually guarded eyes made her heart race. Before she could respond, he continued, his voice gaining certainty with each word. "I've maintained professional boundaries between us these past months out of respect for your position and the foundation's reputation. But tonight, at the gala, I don't want to introduce you as the center director or foundation partner." He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. "I want to introduce you as someone who has become important to both Ethan and myself. Someone we hope will remain in our lives beyond this project." Olivia felt tears slipping down her cheeks, unable to contain the emotions of this extraordinary day and this unexpected moment. "I'd like that," she whispered, her voice steady despite her tears. "Very much." When Alexander reached for her hand, she met him halfway, their fingers intertwining with a certainty that felt both new and somehow inevitable, like the final piece of a puzzle falling perfectly into place. Later that evening, as they entered the gala together, Ethan between them beaming with pride in his first formal suit, Olivia caught a glimpse of their reflection in the center's glass doors. They looked, remarkably, like a family, not one without history or complications, but one forged through unexpected connection and genuine care. From a single sandwich shared with a lost child to a life transformed beyond imagination, Olivia's journey had come full circle in ways she could never have anticipated. When she'd hurried through Millennium Park that cold November day, as Alexander's hand found the small of her back, guiding her into the celebration of all they'd built together, she knew with absolute certainty that some acts of kindness create ripples that change not just one life, but many, a truth more valuable than any villa or material gift could ever be. Thank you for following this heartwarming story from Inspirational Chronicles. If you believe that genuine kindness can transform lives in unexpected ways, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that compassion matters. Remember to subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary impact of ordinary goodness. Until next time, may you both give and receive the kind of kindness that changes everything.